All right, let's just dive right into this because honestly, I know this feeling all too well. Picture it. It's 2 a.m., you have an absolutely impossible exam in just a few days, and instead of studying, you're doom scrolling. You're just sitting there, marinating in this toxic mix of panic and guilt, telling yourself, man, I just lack discipline. But listen to me. I am here to tell you that you are not lazy. Your struggle, it is not a character flaw. Today's explainer is going to expose a massive lie. You, along with almost everyone else, have been relying on a total scam. And that scam is called motivation.
So before you beat yourself up for another second, let's look at why you're actually scrolling on your phone right now. You really need to let go of that guilt because, frankly, you are fighting an unarmed war against thousands of highly paid tech engineers in Silicon Valley. Their literal single job is to hijack your brain chemistry and steal your attention. You didn't just casually lose your focus. It was engineered away from you before you even sat down at your desk.
You see, the whole concept of motivation is just a trap. Think about how many years you've spent waiting to feel motivated, just waiting for that magical, perfect burst of energy where you actually want to study. But here's the thing, motivation is just an emotion. It goes up and down like waves. Building your academic future on a fleeting emotion is quite literally like building a house on the ocean. It's completely, utterly unreliable. And guess what? The top 1% of students already know this. Notice the stark contrast in how they approach this. The average student wakes up and asks, do I feel like studying today? Just by asking that, they're burning precious cognitive energy on a decision. But the elite student, they rely on a system. Systems do not care if it's raining outside, if it's a gloomy Monday, or if you feel like complete garbage. They are designed, biologically rooted routines that work consistently. Elite students don't magically possess more willpower than you. They just rely on engineered neurosystems instead of waiting for the right vibes. Now, to build a system like that, we have to understand the chemistry behind it. Pretty much everyone thinks dopamine is the pleasure molecule. Actually, scratch that. It's false. Dopamine is the desire molecule. It's the I want more chemical. It drives you to chase things. So when you're scrolling on your phone, you're getting massive dopamine spikes from those unpredictable slot machine-like rewards. Your brain does the math in a millisecond. Endless, immediate dopamine spikes from social media versus a huge, invisible effort for an exam that's months away. The chemistry guarantees the phone wins every single time.
And this exact neurochemistry triggers that horrible physical feeling of procrastination. When you stare at a massive textbook, you aren't just bored. You are experiencing what's called the amygdala freeze loop. Your brain literally perceives this high-stakes study session as a threat of failure. It spikes your cortisol, and get this, it actually shuts down your prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of your brain. You aren't being weak. Your biology is forcing an involuntary freeze response to protect you from what it thinks is danger. And if you think you can just fight that freeze response by taking a quick 5-second phone break to reset, well, listen to this staggering statistic. 23. That is the exact number of minutes it takes for your brain to recover its deep focus after a single interruption. It doesn't matter if you only glanced at a text notification for literally 5 seconds. Neurologically speaking, you just wiped out nearly half an hour of your absolute best brain power. Crazy, right?
So knowing all this, you absolutely have to stop fighting your biology. It's a losing battle. You have to start designing around it. Like we established, you don't lack discipline. You lack architecture. It's time to pivot away from the biological problem and look at the structural solutions used by top-tier students all over the world. And that entire transformation, it starts with one thing: environment design.
If you are relying on willpower, you're keeping your phone on your desk and actively trying to resist it. That actively drains your cognitive battery. But designing with friction? That means your phone is physically left in a completely different room. Top students don't sit there agonizingly resisting their phones. They engineer a friction-free environment where the distraction is literally wiped off the map. Distance is for sure your best friend here.
Okay, so the phone is gone, but you still have to, actually start. Physics has a great concept for this called activation energy. Just like a match needs an initial forceful spark to light a fire, your brain needs a spark to kickstart a study session. The absolute hardest part of studying isn't the studying itself, it's the very first minute. Starting the engine is exponentially heavier than keeping it running for the next hour. To bypass that massive activation energy, we use this really precise protocol. We call it the 10-minute hack. Step 1. Commit to just 10 minutes of totally mindless mechanical work. We're talking organizing your desk, writing out a title, super easy stuff. Step 2, give yourself absolute guilt-free permission to quit the second that timer goes off.
This effectively tricks your amygdala because 10 minutes of easy work is way too small to trigger that anxiety freeze loop we talked about earlier.
And here is the total game changer behind why this hack is so incredibly powerful. Once those 10 minutes are up, 90% of the time, you are naturally just going to keep going. Why? Because of a biological itch called the Zeigarnik effect. The human brain absolutely hates leaving tasks unfinished once they are started. It's like a mental splinter. You just had to trick your brain into getting over that initial hurdle. And from there, biology and physics do all the heavy lifting for you.
Now, once you're locked in and in the flow, you must respect your brain's natural operating cycles. This is the ultradian rhythm protocol. Human biology operates in cycles, about 90 minutes of peak cognitive capacity, naturally followed by a 20-minute crash. Elite students don't sit down and force a 6-hour unbroken study marathon. They hack this cycle. 90 minutes of intense, deep work, followed by 20 minutes of strict rest. Trying to push past that 90-minute mark doesn't result in more learning, it just creates fatigue disguised as effort.
But I cannot stress this next point enough. Seriously, true rest must be intentionally boring. If you use that 20-minute break to scroll TikTok or Instagram, you are completely destroying your focus. You flood your brain with those cheap dopamine spikes, and your next 90-minute study block is going to be pure torture. You need to let your brain's background processing, the default mode network, consolidate your memory. That means staring out a window, getting a glass of water, going for a walk. Absolutely no screens allowed.
So what should you actually be doing during those 90 minutes of work? Well, the biggest trap in the Western education system is this. The average student spends 80% of their time on passive consumption, like highlighting notes or rereading chapters, and barely 20% on active practice. This creates a highly dangerous illusion of competence. It feels incredibly productive in the moment, but you are literally retaining almost nothing long-term.
The harsh reality is that true learning only happens through friction. Highlighting, rereading, summarizing, they're entirely passive. They don't challenge your brain. Active recall, on the other hand, is a total game changer. This means closing the textbook, grabbing a blank piece of paper, and forcing your brain to retrieve the information completely from scratch, or explaining the concept out loud to an empty room. That uncomfortable, frustrating struggle to remember the information, that is the exact neurological signal that your brain is actually learning.
To organize this active recall efficiently, use a data-driven approach called the traffic light system. Green means you recalled it perfectly. Skip it next time. Yellow means you had some minor gaps, so review it soon. Red means you completely blanked out. That means urgent review. By treating your failures as data, you target your weak spots with surgical precision instead of wasting hours passively rereading a textbook from page 1.
So pulling this whole explainer together, this right here is your complete arsenal. Environment friction to kill off distractions, the 10-minute hack to completely bypass anxiety, the 90-20 rhythm to sustain your brain's energy, active recall to force long-term memory, and traffic light tracking to guide your efforts. Notice a theme here? Not a single one of these relies on feeling motivated. They are structural, built-in tools that work consistently every single time, whether you feel like it or not.
But to make these tools stick permanently, you need an identity shift. Real change isn't just about doing different things. It's about being a different person. If you wake up and just see yourself as someone trying to study, you will always default to quitting when the friction hits. But if you adopt the identity of an academic weapon, an elite student, that internal debate just vanishes. Studying stops being this awful chore that you hate, and it just becomes an extension of who you simply are.
Which brings us to our ultimate, most important takeaway today. Discipline isn't something you feel. It is something you design. You can finally absolve yourself of all that past guilt, the late-night self-hatred, all of it. You were never lacking some magical willpower gene. You were just operating without architecture, in a world perfectly designed to steal your attention. But now you have the exact blueprint to take your focus back.
Which leaves us with one final provocative question. Tomorrow morning, when that alarm goes off, who will you choose to be? Are you going to keep waiting for the scam of motivation to strike? Or will you choose to build your own unstoppable system? The tools are right in front of you. What you do with them next is entirely your choice.